Welcome to the Behind Beliefs and Behaviors podcast, where we take you on a journey of what is behind the specific beliefs and behaviors that impact individuals and organizations. With our guests, we get to the root cause of what stands in the way of everything from health, wealth, and relationships to leadership, community transformation, and societal progress. From topics on leadership, psychological safety, corporate culture and communication, to parenting, trauma, relationships, personal health, and intimacy, this podcast is sure to get you to the source and provide you practical tips to transform your life one root cause at a time. I am your host, Dr. Maisha Claiborne. I'm a physician, a coach, a consultant, and an expert in trauma-informed communication. The founder of the Mind Remapping Company, I help individuals and organizations better understand the brain, behavior, and the root of false beliefs so that you can more effectively listen, communicate, connect, and create fulfilling relationships and results in your personal and professional life. Join us every Monday morning at 8 a.m. and let's get to the root cause and discover what's behind your beliefs and behaviors. All right. Welcome to another episode. I am so excited for this guest today. She is not only a colleague, but she is also a friend. We are talking today about why organizations should prioritize creativity. And she is the owner of Ignited Word, runs a consulting firm helping organizations with a social mission to be more creative. I am happy and excited to welcome to the show, Malaika Cheney-Coker. Hi, Malaika. How are you doing?
Hi, Martha. I'm doing well, and I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. What most of the people who are listening won't know is that we do have a friendship, a close personal friendship, and our sons are besties.
Right.
Yes. So it's really nice. And I say that because it's really nice to have someone who you can relate to on all levels, both of us being consultants, both of us being entrepreneurs, growing our businesses and having sons. And because all of this, while a lot of people will separate work from life, it really is a spectrum, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't compartmentalize. Yeah, nor you can, but ideally you wouldn't have to.
It takes a little creativity, right?
That's right.
You like that? You like what I do there? Yeah, so I like for my listeners to get to know you a little bit. And so I would love for you to just share a little bit about yourself. Who is Malaika and how did you come to start this consulting company? What made you want to help organizations infuse creativity into their processes?
Okay, yeah, thanks for that opener. So I am, other than being the mother of Asher and Zane, I am actually originally from Sierra Leone with a parent from Sierra Leone and a parent from the Philippines. Grew up in Sierra Leone, so I'm in a way you could call me like this, global citizen and a bit of like a multicultural product, but I've lived in Georgia for the majority of my adult life and definitely consider myself also an Atlanta. And I guess this is in part who I am, but also starts to answer the second question of how I got into the space and this work. I've always wanted to be a writer from the age of 4, really, and had aspirations of writing fiction. And not that desire has by any means died. It's still there. It's still active. I've been doing that on the side, but realized at some point in my early adult life that writing doesn't pay the bills and I would have to think of other careers as well. And while it's like very near and dear to me, I got interested in the work of international development in early adulthood, growing up in what would be considered an underdeveloped country where that whole industry was quite visible to me. And so I studied that for my master's in international development at Clark Atlanta University, right here in Atlanta.
Hey, shout out.
GCUs, yeah.
Yeah.
And ended up working in what we would call the social sector for most of my career. You can think of the social sector as pretty much like the charitable sector, the charity sector, or the philanthropic sector, or the development sector. All these terms have big overlaps, and essentially the kind of work that is about professionally trying to make people's lives better.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating sector. I've had wonderful work, wonderful jobs within it, worked for some fascinating organizations. I ultimately felt the itch to do something that really united my more creative instincts. The writing background, remember that like strong creative drive in that, and help, and then just this wonderful work of social impact and being social mission driven that has been where I've spent most of my professional life. And also having also seen some of the less desirable aspects of the social sector, which oftentimes, due to just the way the sector is structured, that a lot of the work is, there's an aspect of the rat on the treadmill dynamic to it. I felt if I could play my own small part in shaking that up through the kinds of consulting services that we provide and the thought leadership that we provide, then that would be a good way to spend my time.
I really love how and I think this is really relevant. This is really important. A lot of times people will go into professions for what they're good at, or they'll go into professions for what they love and not necessarily consider the business aspect. But what you did was you combined the two. So you went into the social sector and you have your expertise there. And at the core, you're an artist, you're a writer, you're a creator. And so, like in creating Ignited Word, you actually married those two together. And I just love that you did that. And I think that's inspiring for those who may be thinking that they have this love and they have this passion, but maybe they're thinking, how can I integrate that into something that will pay the bills and be profitable? Right? Because I think that's important as well. So I just appreciate you sharing your journey. And I'd love for you to share what it is that you help organizations do, because I think that for those of us who are not in that benefactor, the nonprofit, the social sector in that way, it would be useful to be able to put our hands on, what do you help organizations do?
Great question. At one point, even my own dad couldn't really explain what I do, and I've been doing it for many years. So and for the uninitiated, which applies for any industry, if you're on the outside looking in, it can be quite mysterious. There's a range of many different roles within the social sector. Mine specifically are focused on what we would call more broadly like program quality roles. So if you think of some big chunks of what people do, there are people that implement programs, whether those are like housing programs or homelessness programs or education programs, right? And there are those that work on operational aspects or fundraising aspects. And then there are those that work on broadly program quality aspects, which are everything from like, how do you monitor and evaluate the success of programs? How do you build internal learning cultures? How do you conduct the kind of research that helps organizations know what to focus on? How do you design and things that are actually tied to programs but are a bit more broader, like how do you design for collective impact? How do you understand how networks will work if you start to get into movement work or, again, collective impact? I'm blurring the lines a little bit, but more specifically to what we do as a firm, we do take that creativity lens and we do have offerings specific to creativity, just even helping teams have those initial conversations around understanding why it's important and what are some practices they can put in place to build their creative muscle. We do have a range of services ranging from research, a lot of the things I just mentioned, to evaluation, to strategic planning, to what we call maximizing impact. And we really infuse this lens of creativity throughout, not only because it just makes for far superior results, but also because for each of those areas, there's a lot happening. Like evaluation, for example, there's a lot that's happening around like addressing colonialism and evaluation and shifting the power. and using trust-based approaches. And for all of these things, they tie very well with this idea that it's important for people to be creative, that they should be empowered to be creative, and that these new ways of thinking about subverting the status quo are really also ways of thinking about how to be more creative.
It sounds to me like you are helping organizations innovate in multiple aspects of their organization, be innovative and be on the cutting edge through that lens of creativity. As I was listening and I was thinking, what was really in my head is you help organizations get their life together and then bring creativity into the process. Because when you talk about operations, like how an organization operates, that's the core of an organization. I often like to map things on to personal as well. So if you think about a family unit as an organization, and a lot of people don't think that way, right? If you think of a family unit as an organization, you have the parents who are usually doing executive work. They're the CEO and the COO, right? So you have someone who's managing the operation of the house. And then someone who's maybe managing the financial, the CFO, the financial piece. And maybe there's partnership and there's crossover. If you're not creative, and then you got someone who's managing the kids. So there's the operation of the house. You got your CEO, your CFO, you got your chief people officer, little people officer. And so then you have these various roles in the household, but if you but there has to be creativity in managing all of that in order for you to have the most effective and fun and efficient household. So it sounds like if I were to think of it that way, that's the first thing that came to my mind as a parent. Then that's what you're helping organizations do, is really have the most efficient and effective and impactful organization by helping them use that lens of creativity, by helping them be innovative inside of that creativity. Is that what about right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very useful analogy. Organizations, I think the family unit is it's a great analogy in many ways for organizations. I would say that perhaps one difference in our philosophy is that I think the way that organizations traditionally, and again, I hate to generalize because there are myriad types of organizations out there, and like for any kind of like model, there's
Yeah.
an organization that exemplifies it, right? So I don't want to paint with broad brushstrokes, but I will to some extent. By and large, many organizations are still, or most organizations rather, are still very top down. It's very hierarchical. And so while most organizations want to innovate and be creative to some degree because they understand that it's necessary, whether you're a corporation for maintaining or growing your market share, or for a nonprofit for achieving deeper and longer lasting social impact, they may not always be aware of how their structure can impede, their structure and operations can impede or incentivize creativity. So oftentimes it's understood that, okay, yeah, we need to be creative, and let's make sure that we are hiring a CEO with high levels of creativity. And that actually, there have been studies that showed it's one of the most desired traits for CEOs, or for any of these sort of C-suite roles you mentioned.
Right.
But what organizations are less geared to do is, how do we liberate and support and draw out the creativity of everybody, from your accountant sitting in a corner to even the volunteers that are like the hands and feet of many nonprofits. And to do that requires some things that many organizations struggle with, like sharing power, decentralized decision making, being more open to risk, tolerating some aspects, some degree of failure.
Yeah.
All difficult things. I'm not here to like judge organizations for doing or not doing certain things, because nobody's exactly in their particular shoes. But these are very common organizational behavioral hiccups that inhibit creativity, starting with, are they thinking about creativity as being this democratic value? Or it's the preserve of an innovation team or senior managers or even executive leaders alone.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Really having an organization empower everyone and draw out everyone's creativity. And it's interesting because as you were speaking about that, what it reminds me of, I believe there's a lot of crossover concepts in the work that we do. When I was thinking, oh, well, in order for that to happen, talking about sharing power, talking about the risk taking, talking about the being fallible, like showing fallibility, those are all some of the things in cultures that are psychologically safe. And so the work that has to be done in order to create and to draw out creativity in an organization, like part of that work is that, and you actually said it earlier, is the cultivating trust inside of the organization. And that's something that the leaders have to do. They have to cultivate that trust so that the people who are working throughout the organization also feel that they have the autonomy to take those risks, and it's okay to make those mistakes. And so I love that comes back around, that cultivating trust. I think the other piece too that you highlighted is a lot of the responsibility is top down, but I do believe that the workers involved also have to imbue trust as well. Your leaders have to be able to trust the workers, and the workers have to be able to trust the leaders. I do believe leaders set the tone of trust and safety because of the power dynamic that's inherent in the the system that we live in. And they can also begin to dismantle that. And that's what I'm hearing in what you're sharing.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of latitude, even if there hasn't been this organization-wide mandate or commission to be more creative or take more risks or focus on uplift the value of innovation and provide the things we talked about, including trust to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, there's still, in fact, there's like a method that I use in facilitation, which talks about what's in your 30%. Like there's usually a bit of latitude that individual teams, individual workers have in their work that give them some scope to change things up.
Yeah.
And yes, I think it does come down to a shared responsibility to transform an organization. Granted, obviously, the more senior and powerful you are in the organization, or at least powerful in the sense of traditional power or on paper power, yeah, the more latitude you have. But everybody does have that latitude in some level of, and a role to play in bringing that about. So yes, I would definitely agree.
I love that you said that everyone has that bit of latitude because I think that probably people who are not in those senior positions might think I don't have that latitude. And what I'm hearing as part of what you do, you're helping people in all positions find where that latitude is. And that is what empowers the creative process. What is that? I love that question. What is the 30%? And because people don't think that way, they think they're always in the 70% and never inside of that 30% of where's the wiggle room to do things in a way that may not be the status quo. And not only get the job done, but perhaps even get it done even better than the status quo.
Exactly, yes. And we do this even internally at Ignited Word with our own consultants because creativity is a very highly individual process, is our philosophy. And so we even have like a discussion guide, a discussion tools for ourselves, both at team level and like individual level. Like for individual level, it's guiding the person to think through what are my creative practices or what helps me be in a creative space? What's that flow state for you? Like most people identify with this concept of being in a flow state, but what does it take to get you in a flow state? And so for creativity, it really is a combination of the individual's approach to creativity and the actions they take to support that. Then it can be the individual team's approach, because I've worked in a lot of large organizations which are comprised of like hundreds of teams, right? And so what one team does can be night and day from what another one does. And yes, each team does have some latitude, right? So then what is the organizational approach? So yes, each of these is like spheres of influence of how creativity can be enhanced, essentially.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you think about creativity being an individualized process and everybody having their brand of it, right? Like their embodied process of creativity, what I find so much value in is when you help people inside of the organization find what their embodied creativity is or their inherent creativity is. Because there are people out there who really think they're not creative, which I think is hogwash. I've actually had people say that to me. I don't have a creative bone in my body. And I'm like, yeah, you do.
I, I'm on your side. I completely don't agree.
But people say that. But what's so wonderful is that in doing that in an organization, you're actually helping individuals find themselves. Because as we started the conversation, while we like to separate work and home, it really is more of a spectrum. So it's the impact that you're having in the organization goes beyond the organization. And I don't know if you recognize that as a leader doing what you're doing in organizations, but I just like an acknowledgement to when you really help someone to find that in themselves inside of their job. A lot of times they're at home and this sort of goes into the unconscious mind, and they're at home and something comes up and they're like, oh, maybe this worked there. Maybe this could work there. Or, oh, I remember when I had that, I looked at the 30%. Maybe I can look at the 30% here. So I can just really see where what you do, it not only helps the organizations, it helps the individuals, and it helps them beyond and outside of their world inside the work.
I hope so. And what you described is that not having a rigid divide is pretty much how it works. Yes, we are creative beings. We're all creative beings, and nurturing that inherent creativity spills over into all aspects of our lives. I think most of us are familiar with oftentimes the way that modern work is designed. It's not really designed to uplift and provide space for your creativity. So, for example, if your boss comes by and you're just sitting at your desk staring off into space, they're going to interpret that as you're not working,
Right.
slacking off. Whereas you could be doing some creativity needs that. You need that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say veg out time, but it's almost like a type of downtime or like percolation time where maybe your conscious mind powers down a bit and your subconscious mind powers up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's the space where some of the best ideas come from. And so lots of times people will say, oh, yeah, I have no time to do this kind of creative thinking at work. And nor are they incentivized to do that. But at home or doing my grocery shopping, some like amazing idea related to work will come to mind, which is, of course, a benefit to the employer.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly we hope vice versa, being supported to do your best creative work at work will
Mm-hmm.
also transfer to your home life and therefore just make
Yeah.
you a more happy and engaged person and employee.
Yes. It's funny because as you were talking about being the person being at work and saying, I don't have time for any of this creative thinking at work. And then there in the grocery store, I was thinking about how some of my best ideas come in the car driving
Mm-hmm.
or in the shower. The shower ideas are like the bomb. Or the other place, which actually happened this morning, is like 5 a.m. Like in the morning when I'm really should still be sleeping.
Trying to get those last,
Exactly.
hours.
I woke up at 2 in the morning with this idea, and I can't go back to sleep until I pick my phone up and put it in the notes and then put it down. But it speaks to what you're saying. We need that space, that brain space, that power down state space, and a person who appears to be staring off into oblivion may actually be like meditating on an idea, percolating an idea. And if bosses, if managers, if leaders would allow some space and time for that and not make a judgment call, then there may be some bigger ideas that come out of that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. Is there anything else in terms of what you do that we haven't covered that I haven't asked? Because this is one of those things that I feel like I'm learning in the process as well. I know personally, I know what you do, but this is the first time we've gotten to talk about it in such depth. And I am really learning. So I always like to ask, is there any question that I should have asked that I didn't ask about what you do? Is there anything else that you want our audience to know about what's important about this, about creativity? I think we've talked about a lot of different things. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about why creativity is so important in an organization?
I appreciate the question. And I would say maybe starting a bit big picture with an answer is that a lot of organizations, especially in the social sector, which is the majority of teams are very time pressed, have so many competing priorities, and oftentimes creativity can come across as this, nobody's going to say it's not important. Nobody really believes that. But it's like, where do we find the time? Where do we find the resources, right? And then back to that, do we even have a permissive environment for this?
Mhm.
I would say that it doesn't have to be extremely difficult or time consuming. There has to be commitment that this is important, and let's find ways of building this into what we currently do. And of course, I will make a shameless plug for our website. It
Yes.
has a lot of useful resources, um, which can even be used by anybody. Any team can just take them off our website and use them to get that process going, to have those discussions. It's www.ignitedword.com. And I would also say that in terms of making the case, like for a manager or a team member that says, yeah, I want us to do more of this, how do we make the case? We also have on our website resources that show, for example, that the World Economic Forum, which every 2 years does this Future of Jobs report and surveys hundreds of companies for the past 6 years, like creativity keeps rising in importance as a desired workforce skill to
Mhm.
where it's now number two. It's like creative thinking is the number two most desired workforce skills. That's
Mhm.
essentially saying that of these companies we surveyed, this is the thing, the second most important thing they're saying they need to see in their workforce.
Mhm.
And so there's a very solid case for why it's needed. It's due to things like the volatility of today's world,
Yeah.
the rise of tech, the ability to automate a lot of previously technical tasks,
Yeah.
and just the need for standing out in a pretty competitive environment.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and one more shameless plug I guess I'll make is that we do offer generative AI
Ooh.
plus ideation plus human ideation
Mhm.
workshops that are a nice way for teams to dip their toe in the world of boosting creativity, but bringing a practical problem that they have, whether it's like
Yes.
developing a proposal or improving program design.
Mhm.
And so that is also a way that we can support teams to like, okay, get their hands on what being a more creative team organization can be in a way that isn't extremely onerous.
I love that. I love that. I really have enjoyed this conversation. I I have enjoyed really learning in more depth about what you do and infusing this creativity from the big picture to more specific level. I love the generative AI. I remember we've had those conversations and learning a little bit more about that. And I think this is really important work that you're doing. And I want to have you, and we're going to share all of your information in the show notes. I would love for you to share with me and the audience, who are your best clients? Who are the people that you are your ideal people that you work with, so that people who are listening who may be parts of organizations like this or who may know someone can self-identify or refer?
Another great question. And whereas some folks might say, okay, well, so this size of organization
Mhm.
or this sector of organization, we don't at all judge based on that. We work with any size organization. The thing that identifies who we would like to work with and who is most likely to benefit from our services are teams and organizations in the social sector, of course. They can be corporations, but with a social mission. They can be social enterprises. They can be nonprofits that have some appetite to change the status quo in whatever areas they're seeking. They don't want to do business as usual. They
Yeah.
want to do things differently, and they need some help doing things differently. And
Mhm.
then we're here for you, is what I would say to that.
Perfect. Perfect. And go ahead and share your website once again.
Okay, it's ignitedword.com.
Awesome. Ignitedword.com. And again, we're going to have all of this in the show notes. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story, for sharing what you do, and for the work that you do in organizations. I think, it's so impactful. And I just look forward to seeing you grow.
Thank you so much for having me on, Maisha. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's so nice to have a space to get to be asked these questions and talk a bit about what we do. I have a great team behind me, so it's not like I do all this on my own and have all these ideas on my own. And I want to shout out to them as well. But really, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure.
You practice what you preach inside of your organization. I love that. Yes. So, well, you all heard it. Go check out Ignited Word at ignitedword.com. As I said, all of Malakia's information will be in the show notes. And if you are someone in one of these types of organizations that would benefit from Ignited Word, please share this episode with them. It's so important. And remember to leave a review letting us know what you thought and how you liked this episode. So, with that, I appreciate the audience for showing up, because without the audience, there is no podcast. And remember to subscribe so that you will know when the next episode is dropping. And finally, I just want to one more time thank you, Malaika, for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks as well to you, Maisha.
All right. All right. Well, until the next episode, you all have a great rest of the day, a great rest of the week, and stay empowered. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We know that without the listeners, there is no podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe so you do not miss when we drop our next episode, and share this podcast with a friend, a family member, and a colleague, at least one person in your life today. This episode was brought to you by the Mind Remapping Company, helping organizations create psychologically and emotionally safe cultures that make their employees and leaders feel seen, heard, respected, welcome, and valued, all while fostering a thriving, engaged, and healthy workforce for the organization. Is your organization in need of a speaker? I speak about topics like psychological and emotional safety, trauma-informed communication, and employee well-being. If this is aligned with your organizational inclusion, belonging, or leadership goals, contact me, Dr. Maisha, by going to www.mindremappingacademy.com. That's mindremappingacademy.com. Finally, we train leaders, but we also train coaches. If you're interested in becoming a trauma-informed coach, visit our website as well and check out our NLP coach trainings and certifications. We'll see you on the next episode. Until then, stay empowered.